I served for 7 years there, 8 years at Open Door, like 15 years of my life, right? Serving the Lord, trying to honor him and do things, the right way, the godly way, the biblical way, all of that. And then this is what happened.
Yeah.
So I became very resentful.
Dude, bro, the great Danny Roh is in the house.
My one question, what am I doing here?
No, man, you need to be here. You need to be here.
I'm looking at your playlist of all the people that sat here and have talked. I'm like, either I'm old, which is true, but also, man, like, are you like scraping the bottom of the barrel?
No. All those guys was to prep for you.
Come on.
The musician, the pastor, and now in academics, doing some adjuncting. Dude, there's so much to talk about.
Life is full.
And your Appa, you got 2 now, right?
We got one biological.
Yeah.
And then one that we're adopting.
Yes.
And she's 3. So my biological is 5, turning 6 in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
And then our daughter is 3. So we're excited for that.
And then, we'll talk about that. Adopting a baby, that's also a new experience.
Yep.
Very awesome. And then your wife's name is Annie, right?
Annie.
I remember I only met her during the pandemic because she was picking stuff up from Hannah.
That's right.
And then I only saw her with the mask. And I think it was like on a recent, not even Diana's daughter's party. It was like before that. I saw her for the first time without a mask. I was like, who is that?
That's right.
That's Danny Roh's wife. I was like, oh. It's the first time I saw her face.
That's right.
Oh, man. That's so funny.
A lot of pandemic pickups.
Yeah.
Yep.
You started in pastoral ministry at Philadelphia Church. Was that it?
So Philadelphia Church was my home church. That's like I grew up there. I was in the womb. My mom was serving there. My dad was serving, doing orchestra, all that kind of stuff. So I was there as long as I can remember. And then the church went through this pretty traumatic split. And that was when I was going into middle school. So it was such a crazy thing because I remember like going to church every day and being with my friends. And then, being so young, we don't know what's happening, right? We don't know what the undercurrents are of like what's happening in the church. And all I knew is that my mom and dad were telling me, hey, next week, the church is going to look different. And we don't know if we're going to stay or if we're going to go. So the first day that our church split, I actually went to both churches. We went to KPPC in the morning, and that was such a really odd experience. It felt like the whole Thanos snap, like half the people were gone.
Wait, what was the reason the split? Why did it split?
I have no idea because I'm too young.
Yeah, okay, all right. All right.
I'm assuming from what I've heard subsequently, it's a power struggle.
Okay.
Right. Some
Very
people
common.
wanted this pastor, another person wanted this pastor. I don't know. I'm too young. So I go to KPPC that first Sunday and half the people are gone and, everyone's crying or emotional. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And then afterwards, my mom and dad, they take us and we go down the street, like 2 blocks on Wilshire and Berendo, and we go to the other church. So they call themselves an Open Door. So that's LA Open Door Church. So I was there also on the very first day, and we didn't know what we were going to do. And we were kind of toggling in between. We ended up staying at Open Door or leaving KPBC and going to Open Door. So that's where I grew up from 7th grade all the way into my early years of ministry.
So this is how Open Door started then?
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
This is such good history. Okay, so Open Door starts from the split. You're there from junior high school.
Yep.
When you get into college, did you stay at Open Door?
Yeah, because I was the only one that stayed local.
Okay.
College, sometimes it's like the get out of jail free card. Right. It's like, okay, it's like my opportunity to leave my church. So one friend went to Berkeley, another one went to San Diego, another one went to the East Coast at Ivy League. And so I ended up going to Biola. So I'm still local. So yeah, I was still there as a college student.
And you went there all 4 years?
I was there for the first year, and I started doing ministry as an intern in my second year of college.
Where was that at?
At Open Door.
Oh, okay.
It was weird. Like, I graduated from youth group. I was in college ministry for a year. And then my second year of college, now I'm the intern for the youth ministry.
Okay.
So I only had like a 1 year break from our youth ministry at the time.
So you're interning sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by this time, you already knew like, I wanted to be a pastor?
Not exactly. I
Okay.
had the inkling.
Yeah.
So that's a story in itself. You know, I went into Biola not really knowing what I was going to do. I went in undeclared, and you know, in high school I didn't really care about studying that much. I just did enough to stay eligible for all of my, you know, athletics and things like that, and not get kicked off the team or whatever. Got to Biola. You know, every student there has to take 30 units of Bible.
Yeah.
So I had all these Bible classes. I'm like, what is this? This is just so bizarre. I had no idea what I signed up for, right? Because even just getting there was just like, my pastor told me I should go. So I went. So I go, and it's only in the Bible classes that I'm just loving it. Like, I didn't care about history. I definitely didn't care about math or science. Didn't care about anything else. But in my Bible classes, something just came alive. So then I found out you could actually major in this. But okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with a Bible major, but this is all I know that I enjoy studying. Nothing else up until this time has been enjoyable. So I kind of put my name in the hat and just changed as a Bible major. At that time, I was having conversations with our youth pastor at Open Door, and he and I, we just really hit it off really well. You know, he was a musician. You know, I was kind of getting into worship music, and we were talking, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you come and be an intern under me and just kind of get your feet wet in ministry and see what it's like?" But that sounds really cool. So I started out as an intern, but then about a couple of months later, he sat me down at a Red Robin, and we're going over like the ministry, and he's going into detail about every single student and what I should know about them. And I just thought, that's really odd. Like, why are you giving me a breakdown of each student? And at the end of that lunch, he's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be leaving the country, you know, in a month or so." So he left.
Oh,
so
man.
Here I am, 20 years old, sophomore in college, no ministry experience. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I get put in charge of the youth group.
Wow. Okay. So and you're still in college.
Still in college.
Okay. Got grandfathered in, kind of almost by no choice.
Yep.
You're doing that. Now, while you were at Open Door, were you there when Pastor Ben came in?
Yeah. So I was there, I think for about 2 years. And then I transitioned out. So he came in, oh gosh, I think I was in my last year of seminary, or
so you
right
were there
around
for
that
a
time.
while before he came.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I
Wow.
grew up in the youth group there.
Yeah.
From 7th grade. So that's 93, graduated high school, and then all through college, and then all the way up until 2007. So I was there for a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you said he came in like in your last year of seminary. So I thought you were there like in the beginning days of your seminary while he was there.
No. Yeah. So, but I mean, I knew him obviously because the LA Hanmi days,
Right.
and I had class with him.
Yeah.
Asian American ministry is like the best Talbot class. It was so fun. So yeah, no, I mean, I was very familiar with him. I was actually thinking I was on my way out when he came, and but when he came, you know, he offered to just mentor me for however long.
Yeah.
And as a 25, 26-year-old searching for a mentor, wanting one for a long time, I felt like I couldn't let that opportunity go. So I stayed a little bit longer until I graduated from seminary. And then obviously, you know the deal. When you graduate, you got to get a full-time job.
Yeah.
Right. So
is that why you left? Because you couldn't get full-time at Open Door?
Yeah. So man, that was a crazy story too. You're anticipating your graduation date, right? So I graduated from Talbot in 2005. So before that, I'm trying to, you know, arrange things. I'm like trying to make my plans. I got to figure it out because pretty soon I got to pay back my loans.
Yeah,
it was a lot,
right?
For Biola and for Talbot, right? So I start talking to my senior pastor about, hey, what is this going to look like? And you know, I had a conversation, you know, on the side about perhaps going into this other church and being a full-time youth pastor. Now, mind you, at this time, nobody's doing full-time youth ministry in the Korean church. Like that doesn't exist, right? At least I hadn't seen it. I don't know if you saw it at that time, but so that was a kind of a big opportunity. But my pastor was, you know, he was like a good friend of our family. He really liked me. I liked the church. So he's like, just stay here. We'll take care of you. We'll make it work. We'll figure it out. But I think like in the process of that, I started to realize, you know, I don't know if this opportunity is going to come. And then it got to a point where like, well, if it does come, I don't know if I want to even, be in this type of environment. I don't know if it's a good fit for me. But at the end of the day, there wasn't a full-time opportunity for me, and I had to get a full-time job. So that's kind of where the transition happened.
Was Pastor Ben, was he too fresh and too new to kind of fight for that, to kind of get that for you?
Probably. But even if he did, like, it's just, it wasn't done. There was no precedent for a full-time youth pastor at the Korean church.
Yeah.
So Ben was really instrumental in helping me, find my next landing spot.
Yeah.
And that's something I always appreciated about him, was that he was always interested in my best interest, not what served him well.
Right. I mean, as a young 20s though, Korean, and like Pastor Ben comes in to be the EM pastor, did you ever think like, dude, I gotta stay? It's Pastor Ben Shin, even till this day, he is the godfather. We all revere this guy, right?
I know.
Did you ever think like, even though I can't give, I gotta stay for him? Like, I want to be with him.
100%. I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave. I remember when I first realized he was kind of getting plugged into our church. It was a New Year's Eve gathering. So I go to my friend's house. I walk in the door. I turn to my right and I see Ben sitting on the couch next to Jen. And I'm like, what are you doing here? I didn't know that they were dating and that this whole thing was happening. And so, at that point, he started getting more entrenched in our ministry. And so, I mean, I look back on those days, those 2 years that I was with Ben at Open Door, and it was me, a guy named Yun. Oh, you know Yun.
Yeah.
A guy named Sungwon, couple of other guys.
I know Sungwon too. Yeah.
And those years, like together with Ben, was some of the sweetest times of ministry. So yeah, I didn't want to leave. I really wanted to stay. But just the reality was like, that's not going to happen here.
What was Yun doing at that time?
Yun was the college pastor.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. After you left, how long was it after when Yun left too to do high school at GSC? Was it soon after?
Man, I'm trying to remember if he left first or if I left first.
Oh, okay. So it was kind of around the same time.
Around the same time because, he ended up at Good Stewards. Then I'm at Living Hope and we're just like down the street from each other.
I know.
So we would go hang out all the time.
Yeah.
We would meet up with Sung and we would have like lunches together, talk about youth ministry. I would go visit him at the office. So yeah, it was around that time. My memory is a little foggy on that. I don't know who left first.
So you said it wasn't the right environment for you, Open Door. Unpack that for me. What was it like working with First Gen and being in that Korean church?
Well, so I say that because one, there was nobody that was English speaking that was full-time staff aside from the EM pastor, right? So at the time that was Ben, before that was another guy. So it was just hard to envision me sitting in the associate pastor's office, which was just one big room with a bunch of tables. And I couldn't envision it. It didn't seem like a possibility or a reality for me. So it just didn't seem like it. At that point, I wasn't like, oh, I'm done with the Korean church or anything like that. I didn't have any of those feelings. My whole motivation was I need a job because I have loans to pay back. And, at the time I was working part-time as a youth pastor and then doing the other like part-time, like working at a hagwon or whatever, just trying to get enough money to start paying back my loans. So it was really motivated just by the reality of like my loans and having a full-time job.
So it sounds like you didn't really have like a typical bad experience where there was a lot of problems with First Gen and stuff like that.
Oh no, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah. What are some of those?
Oh my God. Oh Lord. You have to keep in mind, like, I'm still friends with like my senior pastor's daughter, right? Like we're buddies.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So it's like,
don't name drop, keep it as vague as possible.
I mean,
but
it's
like,
just,
what were some of the typical ones?
Okay. So the hard things were, Sunday mornings, we're renting from another church. So our service is at 1:00. Our youth service, the main KM service is at 1:00. The EM service would be at 10 a.m. Okay. So we had to be there as a staff like at 7. So we would have a staff meeting with just our education department, with our education pastor. And then we would have to go downstairs for the 8 a.m. KM first service. And we'd all have to sit in there in our ties, in our suits, all of that stuff, right? and I don't know what's happening. I don't understand Korean. I'm
Mhm.
just sitting there, just trying to be a good soldier, right? So there's that. And then I get ready to transition from 9 to 10, like getting ready for our EM service. So doing that, helping out Ben and, the other pastor before that. And then that happens. And then I've got like an hour, 2-hour break before our 1 o'clock service where I'm now leading it, right? The youth service. We do that. That goes till about 2. Then we have Bible study from 2 to 3. So I had to figure out, what do we do? Bible studies right after like Sunday service. Then from 3 to 5, there's nothing happening. But around 4 o'clock, there's like the evening KM worship service. It's like a different worship service. Like that's where they break out the drums and all that, like more contemporary music. So there's that's happening. And I would have to wait around, or all of us, the staff, we would have to wait around until probably about 5:30 or 6 o'clock so that we would have our final staff meeting at the end of the day. But here's the kicker. We don't know when that meeting starts. It starts whenever the pastor is ready and he comes up. So if he's talking with somebody after the service, or if he's got things to do, or if he's whatever, like I think back on it, it's pretty comical. We're all sitting at this really ridiculously long conference table, like 25 people. And we just sit there and we just wait. And so there were times where then, we would have our meeting and the joke was, okay, whose turn is it to get chewed out, right? Because whatever went wrong that day, like somebody's going to get chewed out. That's kind of the joke, right? And sometimes he would come and then we'd sit for about 2 minutes and he would say something and then we'd be dismissed. Or I remember one time he came so late. He comes in and he's like, "What are you guys still doing here? Go home." Oh. And so my Sundays were from 7 a.m. till sometimes 7 p.m.
Bro.
And I'm a part-time pastor, right?
Bro.
So like there's things like that where it was so hard. It was so hard to go through that. But you're so young and you don't know any better.
Right.
That's all you've seen. That's all you know. So you're like, I guess this is normal, right? So those were some of the challenges. I mean, there were other things, there's the typical getting yelled at in the parking lot, or getting yelled at for this, or you're too loud, or, whatever. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. But those were just some of the things they were challenging.
Ben was at that meeting too, that 7 o'clock meeting, that 6 o'clock meeting. Did he have to go to that?
I don't know how he got out of it.
Because it's Ben shit, yeah, right? It's Ben shit. That's how he got out of it.
I literally don't remember if he ever went. And there came a point in time where I stopped going, and my education pastor kind of like covered for that. So I was really grateful for that. And I had worked with several different education pastors in my time there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a point in time, I think, when Ben came, where there were a little bit less of that. He got a longer leash.
Yeah.
Because he's Ben. So.
But man, you were really faithful there. You were there for like, 9 years as a pastor?
As a pastor, 8 years.
Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Long time.
Well, it's because my youth pastor was there from the time I was in middle school till I graduated.
Yeah.
I had one youth pastor.
Yeah.
At that time, that's also unheard of.
Yes.
Right? You have youth pastors cycling through every 2 years.
Right.
I had the same guy all the way. So again, that's what I saw.
Right.
So I unknowingly just kind of like followed that.
Yeah.
The thought to leave and to go somewhere else, it was never there because I never saw that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a really good point, because when we see good patterns, then those patterns are followed.
That's right.
And we need more of those good patterns,
That's right.
like this example of faithfulness. So, man, that's such a good thing to hear. I don't know if you know this. I think I told you this a long time ago, but I'm going to share this. When you went to Living Hope, I was at CMC, Cerritos Mission Church. I was the elementary pastor there.
Yeah.
And Living Hope had this college/high school position open.
Yep.
And I don't know if you know this, but I also applied to that.
I found out later.
Okay. So I applied to that. And I remember I went through I think 2 rounds of interviews. There was one with Pastor Steve Chang, and there was another one with all the elders.
Yeah.
And then I just remember they were keeping me up to date. And then I remember I found out, I don't know how I found out, but I found out it came down to the last 2. It was you and me. It came to the last 2 people. It was you and me. I don't know how I found out. And I knew who you were. I was like, oh, it's Danny. And I was like, dang, dude, there's no way I'm going to get it. There's no way I'm going to get it. And I remember that and then you got it, and I knew it was going to happen. But I always remembered that story. It came down to you and I for that position.
I know maybe at that time, maybe you would have been bummed, but if it were flipped, who knows? Maybe I'd be doing this podcast.
Right, of course. In the grand scheme of things, of course, that all makes sense.
Yeah.
But I remember, at the time, I was like really sad.
There's definitely a leak right there for sure.
It was really funny. I thought that was really funny. So I remember that story. So you go from a very Korean, typical first gen, second gen church to Living Hope with it, which is English speaking only, just Korean American.
Yes.
What was that transition like?
Man, so I thought that, I didn't know what to expect, right? Because I'm in an EM, I'm in an EMKM context. So again, that's all I know. And the second gen independent Asian American church, there weren't many at that time.
Right.
So I really didn't know what to expect. In fact, I really remember when I was going through that application process or that candidating process, like, I don't want to go. I want to stay here because it was Ben. It was comfortable. It was my home church. I really like during those 2 years that I was serving with Ben, like God really impressed on my heart to really love on the community in LA. So I lived in MacArthur Park area for about a year. And so like my heart was there. So I didn't want to leave. So then when I got to, Living Hope, I mean, I really didn't know what to expect. Everybody was telling me like, oh, it must be so different. It's, second gen, independent, everyone speaks English. And yeah, for sure. But I think when I look back and in those early years, it's like, there wasn't too much that was different, my first Sunday, I still wore a suit because that was kind of the expectation, right? So wearing a tie, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of that was similar. And yeah, just the form, it just felt like an EM, but we're just meeting like at a school and not in a church building with, other Korean people and all that kind of stuff. So I think like it looks like it might be different, but then I think even when I was in the trenches and doing the ministry and serving, it was very much still like a very Korean feel and philosophy.
Okay.
Because that's all we grew up with. That's all we knew. Everybody on staff, right? Just kind of grew up in that same sort of environment. So.
But wasn't it at least a breath of fresh air? Because now you're like able to have a conversation with the head pastor.
Yes, absolutely.
You're able to have a relationship with Steve,
Yeah. So that was really, really different because at Open Door, I didn't have a lot of conversations with my senior pastor just because we couldn't communicate. Like we literally could not communicate, on a deep heart level, So having that type of relationship or conversation, that was really, really, it was refreshing for sure. Talking to the parents of my students who now I'm talking to them in English and understanding their needs and their concerns and what they want and their encouragement to me, stuff like that was just really, really, really helpful. So that for sure was different. But I think like when you get into the nuts and bolts of like how we do things, it was still very Korean. Like we still had early morning prayer, right?
Wow.
Every Saturday. Had to show up.
Had to
I think
show
it was
up.
like at 6:30 in the morning or something like that.
Okay.
So I did that for 7 years, right? And that was hard. Staff meetings, they felt very similar. So there's a lot. I mean, there were things that were obviously different because of the language component. But I think when you really look under the hood, it was still very much, I think, operating under that Korean kind of style or philosophy of ministry.
I think that's so interesting because like even in a Korean American church, English speaking, with like second gen. Steve is like a little more like 1.5, I feel like, right? Yeah. Was he born in Korea?
I think he was born here, but, but he did a lot of ministry in Korea.
Yeah, he was in Korea for a year. So I know that. He told me that. And so I think that's very interesting when we see these Korean American English speaking churches, but because of that's all they knew and that's how they grew up, it operates very much like a Korean church, like a first gen Korean church.
Oh yeah, I mean even the structure, right? Very top down. Right. So it's all about authority, your age, your degrees, and all of that. So even that was very, very similar to like being at Open Door, being in a Korean context.
Now, how long after when you got to Living Hope because they planted out of GSC,
Mhm.
how long after was it when you got there? Or was it like right there recent?
I have no
in the
idea.
beginning? Okay. Because the elementary school, that was the first place they went to. So you were there from the beginning.
There with, so, because I don't know the entire history.
Okay.
But I mean, it
had to have been fairly young though. Like
fairly
within
young,
the first.
Probably within like 10 years, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe less, maybe 6 or 7 at most.
Okay.
I don't know.
I thought it was like year 2 or 3. So then you're saying it's more like
I don't think so, because there were, because I just, when I got there, I remember learning about so many different people who were on staff there who are no longer there. So just by adding those up, it had to have been 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the time you were doing youth and college, or did it morph? I think it morphed more into just a youth group, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. My job went under a lot of changes.
Let's talk about that.
My job description changed significantly. So when I was brought on, I was the director of student ministry. So that encompassed primarily youth, but also assisting in college. So at the time we had a college director who was a part-time guy, Tim Yu. So it was him kind of like really leading the college, but I was there. So I was doing campus ministry with CCM. That was part of my role and my responsibility. Being involved in the college ministry, like their gatherings, things like that. So those were like my main roles. And then I had other ancillary roles of like, I was like the transportation ministry lead, which is a fancy way of like, go gas the van and we'll go get washed and get the oil changed and make sure that it's all up and running. So stuff like that. And then, like we all kind of like took ownership of the office space and making sure that things are purchased. And so everybody had their roles. My role was make sure that we have water. So I would go take our 5-gallon jug of water, go down to Ralph's, fill it up, bring it back.
This is very Korean style.
Yeah,
wow.
Right. So
wow.
Yeah. I'm like, why can't we just get like some Culligan or something?
Yes. Yes. Okay. That's really surprising to hear. Now, how long after, because you said Tim Yu, but then Tim Pack became college pastor, right?
Right. Yeah. Pretty shortly after. So Tim Yu probably, a year and a half. And then he started studying over at Fuller. And then Tim Pack came down from Seattle.
Our friend Tim. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that was around 2009, I want to say.
Okay.
So yeah, it was pretty early on too, because I got there in 2007.
Is that when Tim Pack came? Is that when you kind of let go of college ministry and just let him do it?
It wasn't like a let go. It was more of like, let me take your hands off of this and let me give you something else.
Yeah.
So right around that time was when we were exploring a building campaign or a building move. So we're looking for properties to move into a permanent space. So in the midst of that process, my role became really just like focusing on the students because that was my main responsibility. But then what happened was when we moved into the building, I then became the facility manager. Okay. So
what does that mean? What does that mean?
A lot of things, John. It means making sure that the building is open and closed when it needs to be.
Okay.
It means making sure that it's cleaned. Sometimes I had to do the cleaning. Sometimes we had custodial services. So I had to coordinate all of that, find a custodial service, get the contract or get the agreement, negotiate prices, things like that. Anything that had to do with our fire alarms, termite inspection, pest control, anything that had to do with the building was kind of under my purview.
Why was your role like that, do you think? Why was, when you hire a full-time youth pastor, why isn't it just full-time and facilities should be handed off to like, I don't know, like an actual operations manager or something like that? Why do you think your role was split like that?
It's a really good question, John, because I asked the same question.
What were you thinking at the time? Let's start with that. What were you thinking when they were like, hey, guess what, Danny? You're going to be facilities manager. Like, how did you process that?
Okay, so here's kind of how it went down. So in the midst of that building search, we hired church consultants, right, to come and kind of do an assessment of where we're at. They had told us that for a church our size, we had one too many full-time staff.
Really? How big was Living Hope at the time?
Probably like 350 maybe.
And how many full-time staff did you have 3 at that time?
So now it's a third.
Wow. Okay. They're saying too many full-time.
That happened. And then I remember having a conversation about basically our church shouldn't have this many, but because you're already here,
Right.
I guess they could let me go, but they didn't, right?
Yeah.
Well, then let's add more responsibilities to your plate
Yeah.
to justify a full-time salary.
Very, very Korean culture.
It is,
very
right?
Korean culture there.
So that wasn't part of my original job description.
Right.
I still have a copy of it. I can show you, right? But things just started changing.
Okay.
And it was hard for me because like, that's not my gift mix.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not like the best at stuff like that.
But that's not what you were hired for.
And that's not what I was hired for.
You weren't
Exactly.
hired for that.
So that has a whole like host of like implications, right? To like how things turned out over there. So, but yeah, my approach was, well, I mean, you got to keep in mind, I'm still in my, late 20s. I'm still young.
Right.
I don't know any better.
Right.
So, okay, if the pastor tells me that I'm overpaid, I think I was only making like $33,000 a year, by the way. Right. So if I'm being overpaid, you need to do this on top of that. Okay, well, I don't really have a choice. Right.
Yeah.
So my response was, okay, I don't know if like this is a really good fit for me, but hey, I'm willing to do what's needed to help our church move forward.
Yeah.
So that happened. So then that, became a pretty significant part of my job because, when you go from a, tiny little office building for just your office space to now like this massive building, and you're in charge of it, that took up a lot of time, took up a lot of energy.
Energy for sure.
And it's like, if somebody asked me, like I'm a worship leader, right? If somebody asked me, hey, can you lead like 2 songs? I can do that like so easy. But if somebody asks, you or somebody else who's maybe that's not their forte, they could do it.
Yeah.
But it takes more energy to get to that point and to prepare. So that was kind of like me with that role. So that was really hard.
I experienced something very similar to you at GSC, where I was the elementary pastor and the same conversation came up. I just got married and I was like, really can't be part-time anymore. I got to support a family, things like that. And the elders said the same thing. They were thinking like, well, elementary doesn't do enough. It doesn't do enough. Of course, we have that conversation. Yeah. What does that even mean? And so what they said is, if you want part-time to half-time, then you have to host a second service. This was kind of like I think there's third service where instead of me going to my EM, like instead of Hannah and I going to GNC for our worship service, we had to give that up to host like this thing for this third service. It wasn't even elementary service. It was like literally like 4 kids were there and I just had to figure something out for them. And then it's same exact concept. They were like, that's how you did more work to justify you getting halftime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And after I said yes, because I was like, well, I got to get halftime. But I was like, gosh, this is so not worth it, But I was like, but I have no choice, I got to do it.
Yeah.
So it's a very Korean mindset to do that. Like, it's like, you're not doing enough work, or like the value of work, what you're doing is not worth full time,
right.
And then of course, this is why like a lot of us leave, right? And then you lose,
you start
like
thinking about that.
Yes.
And you're like, well, I guess then you don't feel valued.
Right. You don't feel valued. Right.
Yeah.
So you leave and then you got to go find where you feel valued. Wow. Okay. That is very, very interesting. Your role there. So you did youth for how long there at Living Hope?
Living Hope, 7 years.
Okay. So I know you were there for a long time, because back in that time, when I thought about who are the premier high school pastors, it was always you and Yun. That's who I always thought about. Danny Roh, Yun Chung. These guys are like the best high school pastors I know. And you guys did it for so long. You had this long, a faithful period of doing high school. Most of your students during that time were millennial high school students. Mm-hmm. So you did, was your youth group junior high and high school?
That's right.
Okay, so you had junior high school. And I still remember that retreat I spoke for you guys. That was a fun retreat. So fun. Matt Cho was there, that was good stuff. Still got that electric zip-up hoodie, electric blue zip-up hoodie. What were your thoughts during that time of doing youth ministry with millennial high school students, especially for Koreans where their parents were not immigrant parents anymore.
Yeah.
Now these are Korean American second geners.
Yep.
And you now have their third gen kids. What was that like coming from Open Door, which was second gen, and then immigrant parents. So what was that like?
Yeah, very different. Different, but also not too different. So it's funny that you say that, because when I went to Living Hope and I knew I was going to undertake this whole role of becoming the new like youth pastor, my first call was to Ben. Said, Ben, who are the Asian American, Korean American like experts in youth ministry? And Ben knows everybody.
He knows everybody. He knows everybody.
And you know how many names he gave me?
Like what? Three? Like three?
Zero.
Oh my gosh!
Because there weren't any.
That's amazing,
right?
Wow, shocking actually.
Like, because who's doing youth ministry for longer than 6 years at that point?
Right. They all want to jump off. And
he couldn't give me any names. So I said, okay, well, if there aren't any experts in youth ministry, then I better become one. That was my mindset.
Great.
So my first 2 years at Living Hope, I read voraciously youth ministry books, right? Now in seminary, we had read, Doug Fields, purpose-driven youth ministry, Bo Bosher's over at Willow Creek, student-driven or student impact ministry, stuff like that. But I started to just dig into like, who are the other, voices in youth ministry? So I just started reading a ton and, came across like the Orange curriculum stuff over at North Point, just reading different people, the Devers, like just like subscribing to youth ministry newsletters to see what's coming out there. And I just started like devouring all of that because I wanted to be able to pass that on to the next generation of youth pastors, right? That they can have a resource that can help coach them the next phase. So, and guys like Yun, like, we're doing it together. Like there was no competition, of like, oh, this is your youth ministry, this is mine, and we're down the street from each other. It was like, what are you learning? What are you talking about these days? And we talked a lot, and that was a really, really just good friendship. So that happened. So back to your question, what's it like? I would say back then, I don't think the conversation around generations was as prevalent as it is today. Mm-hmm. Like now we're just so quick to be like millennial. Oh, you're a Gen Z. You're then I don't think we really understood that.
Right.
So I can't say that I thought, oh, these millennials are, I don't, because I didn't even know what that was. Yeah. I don't even know if the term was really around
not even.
Or being used
right,
all that often. So what I learned was, one, because it's still an Asian American context, academics is king, right? So that was always like everything revolved around like school, academics, stuff like that. So that didn't change. Mm-hmm. The thing that was different was because these are students who have second gen parents that are, American born. Other things were also coming up, like sports, youth sports, extracurriculars, like just being involved, stuff like that. So I saw a lot of that. So it was very similar in that way. But I would say, I don't know, maybe I just had a unique group. Dude, my students were incredible. Like they were so easy. People are like, oh, I don't know how you do youth ministry. It's so hard. I'm like, no, they're incredible. Like they showed up. They came out during the week to just hang out in the office with me. They would come early on Fridays just to hang out and serve. They would come on Sundays, Saturdays. Like they would do so much. They were so incredibly involved. So I don't know if that was a product of just like the church itself or their parents or what. I was just really blessed. That's all I can say is like, it was a really, really unique group of students.
Did you ever feel uncomfortable though, because you were now at a Korean American English speaking church where now the parents and you can actually have dialogue? But just like how all of us grew up, we never really did ministry with adults. Did you feel uncomfortable? Like, how do I, minister to the adults, not the parents now? Because I never really did that before.
No, I didn't. I embraced that. And the reason is because in my reading, right, I'm just picking up books. I read a book about family-based youth ministry. You look at the Orange curriculum, it's all about how to involve the parents. I just thought this is how we should do it. It's not just the church, but it's the church and the family. And together you can make a greater impact in their spiritual life. So I embraced it. So I remember when I first came, one of the first things I did was I hosted a quarterly symposium, a parent symposium. So I would invite them after service, bring coffee, and I would tell them, here's what's happening in our youth ministry. Here's my vision for the year. Here's some things to look forward to in the quarter coming up, or in the next half year or whatever. I sent out quarterly newsletters to the parents, breaking down, here's our curriculum. Here's what we're learning. Here's what your students are going to be learning. Here's what we're talking about. Here's our sermon series. Here's, our events that are coming up down the pipeline. We want to invite, their non-Christian friends to come to this. So I was sending those out quarterly. I'm having conversations with parents regularly because now I can, because we can speak English. During our small groups, I'm sending them weekly emails saying, hey, this week, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about forgiveness. So when you're at home with your kids, here's some questions. I give them questions. Here's some questions that you can ask at the dinner table. Because these are all things that we need to solidify at the home, because you can't just leave it to me. Right. It's got to be both. It's both of our responsibilities, and let's do it together. Tell me what you're trying to emphasize at home. Tell me what your goals are for your kids so that I can reinforce those things, right? Because sometimes students hear mixed messages from what parents say and what maybe their pastor might say. So how do we do that? So for me, it was very much how do we do this together? Now, looking back, the one thing that I wish I did as I was studying nonprofit management and things like that is I should have had a committee of parents that I could lean into as an advisory board. Hey, what sermon series, is going to be helpful? What are you noticing among not just your kid, but the other students? What are you hearing from your friends who have kids in this ministry? I wish I did a little bit more of that and kind of get more of a sounding board, because I think, for me, I did too much of that in my own headspace. So that's the one thing that I wish I did.
Hearing all your practical ideas right there is really surprising to hear, because that's not too common. That doesn't happen, especially in Korean church, even in that time period. Maybe it's happening more now.
Right.
So it's actually you were almost before your time for you to do all those things. But were you nervous at all? Or did you just say I'm going to go for it? Because if you were nervous, because I was always nervous because we never did that. So if you were nervous, man, that's a skill. That is amazing.
I wasn't nervous, but it's because the parents, from day one, they embraced me and they accepted me. Yeah. There was no, okay, well, let's see what this guy has.
Right.
I was invited to their homes, just gifts, just everything. So I really do credit it to the parents who were just so receiving of me. So I never felt like I had to prove myself or I had to impress them. It really became a partnership, right? I was at the wedding of one of my students a few weeks ago and saw his mom, and we talked briefly, and she just said, you helped raise him. I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't do anything. But that's her perspective, that I helped raise her own son during those times. And sure, yeah, I might have been there for him in critical moments, but it's both and. It's not just me, or it's not just parents. You really got to do that together. So I had awesome parents to work with.
I mean, that's, again, man, we could talk a lot about that. When parents embrace you and when they do everything you just said, it just, again, it creates such a good pathway for the pastor.
Yeah.
These are good patterns that we got to follow, because then all those kids, when they become parents, do the same thing, right? We got to start those patterns.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, thank you so much for watching. If you're finding value in this content, can you please support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, selecting all on the notification bell, or write a comment down below. All 4 of these things helps our channel get pushed out more on YouTube homepages so that more people can find this value. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. You experience now something else here. There's some actually key transitions in your life. You did this one from Open Door to Living Hope. Yeah. First gen, second gen to mostly second gen. And then from Living Hope, you go to Saddleback. I went there. I feel like I was there maybe 1-2 years before you were, but you went to Saddleback Church, total non-Korean church, totally different in systems and structures, even stylistically.
Yep.
Not only what was that transition like, but again, why did you leave? Because Living Hope was kind of a premier Korean American English speaking church. Again, kind of like Ben Shin, why did you leave? It's Ben Shin. Living Hope, Why would you leave? You're like, man, this is the place to be.
Yep.
What pulled you out of there?
It wasn't a pull. It was a push.
Okay.
So, and I've shared this story publicly on a podcast, The Same Boat with Roy. And so I don't want to like delve into that. You know, at the time, the public, I guess, reasoning was I resigned. Okay. But in reality, in actuality, I was asked to resign. So I was fired. So
Wow,
I didn't have a choice.
Dude, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I did not know this.
So it was yeah, you need to go kind of thing. So
oh my gosh.
that had like a whole, I don't know, just a host of ramifications or the way that it affected me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
In
Oh
my life
gosh.
and in ministry and things like that. So it was brewing for sure. And I think when I look back, it started during the building campaign and moving to a building and my roles being my responsibilities being changed, feeling devalued, being told that I'm overpaid, things like that. I think that's where it really started to change. And my relationship with the leadership there really just started to unravel. So there were a lot of mistakes made during that time. And there was a lot of conflict. And for me, it was just a really unhealthy place for me to be, you know? And so I remember sitting down, I asked a former pastor at Living Hope to lunch. And I just, cause he understood, like he knows what it's like to work there and all of that. So we talked and I'm asking him questions. And at the end of that, it just really came down to, well, okay, I either like just suck it up and just stay and, you know, get in line, or I have to leave. But if I leave, where am I going to go? So as you said at the time, Living Hope has like this aura of like, it's the premier, like second gen Asian American church. So if I leave there, where am I going to go? There's not a lot of churches like that.
Right, at the time, especially.
Right. I mean, you got Crossway down the street and, you know, there's other places, right? But it's like,
very
you're
few,
thinking
though.
about it, you're like, yeah, where are you going to go? And I just thought like, well, do I even want to go to a context like that anymore? So, you know, once I was asked to leave and I had to start looking for my next landing spot, I didn't look at the Korean church and I didn't look at the Asian American church.
Right.
There was a lot of wounds and a lot of hurt. So I didn't want to even go into that space.
Yeah.
Right. So then I thought, well, you know, I've always wondered what it would be like to work in a multi-ethnic kind of setting. That was just something that I had always thought about. In fact, that seed was planted by DJ because he came and spoke at Living Hope when he was doing his PhD studies at the time. And so I started thinking about, what does that look like to be in a multi-ethnic context in church? So that's kind of how, you know, Saddleback kind of came on the radar. I didn't want to go there. It's so different, right?
Yeah.
I tell my friends, they're like, it just sounds so white, right? Right?
Saddleback.
Yeah, you know? And so it wasn't like something that I'm like, oh, this is where I need to go. I think just the opportunity kind of presented itself.
DJ reached out to you?
DJ, yeah, we talked.
Because he was the campus pastor at
Irvine
North.
That's right. And it's because like, you know, we were in Talbot together. We were in preaching class together with Suki. And like, so there's a relationship, there's a trust. And as we met, I was just really curious about what this could look like. And so that's kind of how that transition happened.
Wow. Yeah. I never knew this. That's what happened to you, Living Hope. Before we get into Saddleback, because I think this is really valuable, getting asked to leave pretty much must have been extremely difficult. So
it was traumatic.
What did you do? Those are the things that, like, you know, we never want to experience. And then when we do, especially in our culture, there's not really a lot of avenues to, like, you know, seek and like how to process that and find healing for that. So what did you do? How did you get out of that funk?
Ooh, so in the beginning, it was very unhealthy. Just a lot of binge watching Netflix, right? A lot of it was just feeling entitled. Like, dude, I served for 7 years there, 8 years at Open Door, like 15 years of my life, right? Serving the Lord, trying to honor him and do things, the right way, the godly way, the biblical way, all of that. And then this is what happened.
Yeah.
So I became very resentful. I don't know if that was ever towards God, although I did question him a lot during that time. And so it was pretty unhealthy at first, and a lot of just like just being really sad to myself, right, and not really showing that and not talking about it. And then I knew that a couple of things had to happen. One is I needed to get to a place of forgiveness for a lot of people who had hurt me during that time, and I had to get to a place where I could just be healthy again and not hate the church. So we were going to churches at the time and church hopping and just visiting people, different churches. And man, I would go in and I would be so bitter. Like we were singing like happy praise songs. I'm like, this is stupid. Why are we singing this? So I had to learn how to lament and lament well. Right. I just read a lot of books. I read a lot of books to kind of help me process a lot of that. And there's one book in particular by Andy Stanley called Enemies of the Heart. That one really kind of unlocked a lot of like what was happening inside that I wasn't aware of. So like I don't come across as an angry person, I think for the most part.
Yeah.
But I learned that I had so much anger in my heart that that was not being resolved. So there's just a lot of that, a lot of reading, a lot of talking, processing with people. And honestly, like Saddleback was a huge, huge part of my restoration to ministry and to pastors. It was so healing for me to be there. And so even though I was only on staff for a year and a half, that experience is like, I look back and I attribute my healing, a lot of it to that experience.
Why?
there.
Why did Saddleback help you in your healing process? I
was around pastors that were gracious and communicative and supportive. So I'll give you an example. Like in the Korean American context, right? Like I mentioned earlier, there's a bit of a hierarchy, right? So I can't tell you how many times I got asked by church leaders, like, how old are you again? Like, did I just told you? I told you like last week. And like I'm in my, early 30s, right? And then I realize, oh, they're not asking because they're curious how old I am. It's like putting me in my place.
Right.
I didn't realize that.
Cultural nuance there.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of that, right? Things that I would want to do that, you can't do that. Just like not affirming of my gift, right? Then I get to Saddleback. I'm barely there for like 3 months. And I've got pastors from Lake Forest, like the base pastors come in, like just encouraging me. Rob comes up to me. He's like, dude, Danny, you should be doing that. You're capable of that. I'm like, Rob, you don't even know me. But he recognized like there was gifting and he was like affirming like, you should be doing this kind of stuff. So just stuff like that, and the staff that I was with DJ and the others there, it was so good. So a lot of that was really, really healing for me.
That's such a cool story to hear. Wow. I love that part of your healing process journey. Now, again, another huge transition in life, because now you're like in pretty much a white church. I know we are very multi-ethnic, and then especially both of our campuses, Irvine North and South.
Yeah.
We are the most Asian, so that is true. Yeah. However, it is a lot of white people, and it's pretty much an American church in terms of philosophy and ministry and things we do. What was that like? Transition of philosophy of ministry. All you knew was Korean church style. Now coming to Saddleback. Yeah. How did you deal with that?
So I think like structurally, systematically, I should say, it was actually pretty easy. But you have to realize it's because I read so many books on like youth ministries by Saddleback, Willow Creek, North Point, right? So they all fit like that, mega church, white evangelical kind of model, right? So I was familiar with it in concept, but now I'm like experiencing it in real life. So that was really easy. I would say there were other nuances that I would just, whoa, this is just so weird. because I wouldn't see this in the Asian American church, right? So for example, I got on staff, and you meet all the other different regional pastors, especially within student ministries, and you really develop like a big like cohort and just like a brotherhood and sisterhood with these people. And then we would meet like monthly, and like every month, like, oh hey, this person's leaving, they're going here. Oh, this person's leaving, they're going here. I'm like, what in the world? Like people would not stay in their positions for more than a year or two or something like that. But it was so normal, and that was really jarring for me. I'm like, whoa, where is like the consistency? So that was just like, that's an example. I don't know if it's right or wrong or good or bad, but that was just one of the adjustments that I had to make. But I think, yeah, as far as like how the church operated for me, dude, it was a breath of fresh air. Like I was like, yes, this is what I want. Another example, HR. I didn't know churches had HR.
Right.
So in the hiring process, right, we meet with HR.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there with Linda Kelly and Raina, and like we're going through all this stuff, and it's like, this is so weird. But I realized, it's in there for your protection. Right. When I was at Saddleback, I was only part-time. I don't know if you knew that. I was only part-time.
Yeah, I knew that.
So this is the first time that I'm part-time, and I actually have a time card. I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And my first inclination was, hey, you can't put a time limit on ministry and passion and service, right? I didn't realize that was for my protection.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was limited to 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
So if I went beyond that, I should be compensated for it.
Right.
That concept doesn't exist in the Korean American context. Yeah. It's like the more you do, we're told you'll get compensated in heaven.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
So that was really bizarre. So like, in Saddleback, like Easter, Christmas, oh my God, it's bananas, right? The amount of work that we put in.
Yeah.
So DJ would be like, hey, I need you to do this, and this, and that. I'm like, okay, cool. But DJ, that's going to put my hours up to like 30, 35 hours a week. Like, put on your time card. So I'm like, okay, so I do that and I get compensated. So that was just such a bizarre experience. And now I'm like, this is what I tell my students now that I mentor in my program. Your church needs to have, if you're part-time, you need to have some sort of mechanism to like measure your time.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go in these positions without having something like that.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to get taken advantage of.
Right.
Not that they're going to do it intentionally, but you're going to want to serve. You're going to want to do extra things because that's your heart, right?
Yeah.
But you also don't have unlimited time. So you need to understand that. But again, at a young age, and we don't see that in the church, I didn't understand that. That was just so bizarre.
What about how you were able to minister to more white parents and non-Asians?
Yeah.
What was that like? What was that transition like? Now this is a totally different culture.
Yeah. So, well, also culturally, like the context, we're in Irvine.
And it's Irvine, which again, a lot of people don't know. This is a whole nother story.
It's another world,
man. The city of Irvine.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother story.
Yeah. So, gosh, what was it? The 3 A's, like academics, athletics, and the arts. Like those totally dominates, right? So church is like, yeah, we're there unless we have one of these things. And that's just, and there's no like apology.
Right.
It's like, no, this is just how our life. So man, not knowing who's going to show up on a given Sunday. So like at Living Hope, I know I've got like my 30 core students out of like, let's say 60, like I know they're going to be there. Like maybe 3/4 of them are going to be there every single Sunday. I get to Saddleback, I wouldn't see people for weeks on end, right? And I just don't know who's going to show up except for maybe like the 5 core leaders who are there. So that was a really big change. And I think because of the pace and the busyness of life for these students, there wasn't a ton of conversation with parents. I wouldn't even, for most of them, I wouldn't even know who they were because, they wouldn't even come pick up their students. The students would just go off and find them afterwards. So, I mean, I'm trying to find ways like, how do I engage with parents? We'd set up our pop-up tent, like Saddleback loves our pop-up tents and got our table, SSM, tablecloth. And I just sit out there and try to engage. But that was really hard. So yeah, not knowing who's going to be there. And it's really hard, it's really hard to do ministry when you don't know or you don't have consistency with the people that are there. That was a really big challenge.
You're at Saddleback for like a year and a half.
Yep.
And then you went through a third transition.
Another one.
Coming out of Saddleback.
Yep.
What was going on there? Why did you transition out of there?
A lot. I realized as healing as Saddleback was, I didn't heal fully. So I started to notice that there were things in my heart that I had not resolved. So I started projecting my pain and my wounds onto DJ, onto the church. So if like the church's like, hey, we're doing a campaign, we all have to be here for this. My wounds of like, you got to do more and more and more. It's like, oh, this is so stupid. Why am I here? You know, I started to realize that. And, you know, like for DJs, like, dude, we're friends. And I just thought, you know, one, I want to stay friends, right? And I don't want to project my wounds onto him because he's my boss, right? So there was that element of it. The other part of it was, you know, Annie and I, we had just gotten married, you know, a year or two prior to that. And so we were trying to establish like rhythms as a family. And then I knew that our son was going to be on the way in, you know, 9 months or so. So I just started thinking about a lot of that stuff. And really what it came down to was I need to step away from ministry because my heart is not in a good place. I can't do this well when I have some unresolved issues in my own heart. So just recognizing that, I just had to kind of say, hey, I need a timeout. So that plus the desire to have a rhythm with my wife. She was, you know, working Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, right? I'm working 2 part-time jobs, Monday through Sunday, at odd hours. So we just weren't seeing each other. So I wanted to get on a schedule with her. I wanted to be in a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job. So that's kind of what led me to Biola. Now,
again, such a interesting transition here because Living Hope, Premier Korean American Church, Saddleback, globally renowned mega church, like all the young Koreans would love to work here, right? Yeah. And having to step away from that, like a huge, well-known church.
Yeah.
What was that like? How did you process that?
Yeah.
What was that like giving that up?
So what was really instrumental was that summer, you know, I had kind of rallied some of our church members together to go on a peace trip or a mission trip. We call them peace trip at Saddleback, right? So we went to our Hong Kong campus. So that summer we go and, you know, Pastor Stephen. So we're having lunch after church and I just asked him his story, you know, and he had come from like the business world going into ministry. And I just asked him about that transition because I was starting to think about going the other way. And he did like, this is just how the Lord spoke through him. He doesn't know this, but he pulls out his business card, Pastor Stephen, Saddleback, all his contact information. And he's just like, this is who I am, right? My name. And then he tears out the name. He's like, Saddleback, this is just where I work right now. But I know that I am Stephen and like, I am a child of God. This is my identity. This is what matters to me. That was so profound for me because you're right. I didn't want to leave Saddleback either because, you know, I don't talk a lot about the places that I used to work, but I'll tell you, I always name drop Saddleback, right? I used to work at Saddleback, right? Because it's like, oh, it's impressive. So I didn't want to lose that. I really didn't want to. But that little like business card, you know, demonstration that he didn't even know why he did that. But that showed me and told me like, it doesn't matter where I work. That's not who I am. That's just what I do at the moment. Who I am is still a child of God, a servant of the Lord. That was really instrumental. And I didn't realize how much of my identity I put into my church and into my job. You know what really helped me realize that is so stupid is when I left Living Hope and I had to change my Facebook profile, right? Because like I no longer work at this church. So I had to remove that. And doing that, I felt so ashamed and I felt so lost. And so the thought of that was, man, going through that again, I don't want to do it. But that little thing that happened in Hong Kong, like God was reminding me. So he's like, I have something else for you. And so that's kind of what kind of helped me let go of a really good thing at Saddleback. I mean, a lot of times I still wish I was there, I still follow everybody like you. I see what you guys are doing. I'm like, that's so cool. Like, I love that. It was such a sweet experience for me. And I wish I had some of that still. But knowing that that's just what I would be doing. That's not who I am. So that was really helpful for me, my transition.
That's a powerful illustration that you did with that business card. I love it. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
You go from pastoral ministry now into academics.
Sort of.
Okay.
I mean, I'm at an academic
administrative. It was a little bit like more administrative. I know that, but it's no longer pastoral ministry in the church sense, right?
Yeah.
Was that hard for you because you were called to be a pastor and now you're doing like more administrative stuff? How was that kind of transition?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. So, my job, I took an entry-level job as an admissions counselor. I thought that the job entailed talking about Biola and helping students choose to go to Biola. What I didn't understand is that a large component of that job is basically sales or recruiting. So get this. Our dress code back then was, like everything except for the jacket, slacks, tie, dress shirt, dress shoes, all of that. So now I'm back into that wardrobe, right? I went from like cargo shorts at Saddleback,
SSM,
right? To now back into this. I had to go buy a whole new wardrobe at H&M, right? Because they're cheap, but they look good.
I love H&M.
Right? So now I have this whole new wardrobe. And so I remember I'm on my first recruitment trip, fly up to Washington. I'm in Seattle and I'm dressed. I look like a car salesman. Okay. Apologies to any car salesman, but I just look like, that's what I look like. Got the tie and all that. And I'm dragging my lit bag, my literature bag, those rolling suitcases behind me. And I'm going from school to school, meeting with students who might be interested in Biola. And sometimes I'd go and there's like 3 people. Sometimes there's 1, sometimes there's none. And I remember doing that and I'm walking to the front entrance of the school and this thought popped into my head. Danny, what world are you doing? What am I doing? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Like carrying around this literature bag and trying to recruit students to this school? Am I fulfilling like God's calling in my life? And I remember having that thought. And there were a lot of times in those early years, like the first couple of years where I wrestled with if I was making the right decision. For me, it was a temporary thing. In fact, when I got hired, I told my boss, and you probably should never do this, but I told her, hey, I'm probably only going to be here for about 3 years. And I think, I'm here because I want to rest. I want to recharge. I want to get healthy so that I can go back into the ministry context. 3 years turned into 6, right? Because God had different plans for me in the midst of that. I don't do admissions anymore, but he used that experience to kind of help me do what I'm doing right now. So yeah, I definitely struggled a lot in the beginning. But the thing is, John, is like now I look at what I'm doing and all of my experiences up until that point is what goes into my job right now, including the past trauma and pain that I went through. All of that God is using in my current job, which I would have never, ever imagined.
So many times when we suffer or struggle in life, in the moment, it's so hard to think about like, why or how are you going to use this for good? And then years later, we realize that you wish you could just fully trust in that moment, but it's so hard because you're struggling and suffering.
Yeah.
But then like what you said, now you know like, oh, this is what I was being groomed for. All of this, even the bad stuff was for this moment.
Yeah.
So that's such a great story to hear.
Yeah. So one of my top 5 strengths for strength finders is connectedness. So the ability to kind of just like see things that, happen in the past and how they connect and how they, because it changes like your outlook and it changes even your perception of things that are happening. So the way that I like to describe it is like a connect the dot kind of exercise, right? So in a connect the dot paper, you've got all these dots all over the place and you have no idea what picture this is going to make, right? But as you start to connect them, eventually when you finish, you get an image or you get this picture. It's like, oh, so that's what it was. So for me, knowing that, hey, all these experiences, like I know that God's going to do something. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the image looks like. What surprised me was how he's been using my past church trauma to minister to people now. That I had no idea. It's so strange. I don't know how people find me, but I get random emails saying, "Hey, somebody said I should talk to you. I'm going through this at my church, and I just need someone to talk to." And so I do that, and I meet with people. I don't even know them. I can't even tell you their names because I don't remember, right? And I don't know how that happens, but like God is even using those things in my life today.
You go from open door, first, second gen, Korean American church, second gen mostly, English speaking, to mostly a white multi-ethnic church, Saddleback, to now Biola, doing admin, academic stuff. And then now you're back.
Yeah.
At a Korean church, even though you guys are separated from the first gen, but it's a shared campus, which is kind of like the model that we're seeing a lot now with Korean churches.
Yeah.
You have an autonomous English-speaking Korean American church that has this partnership and relationship with the first gen, autonomously, financially separate, but meeting on the same campus. Why did you go back to the Korean church?
That's a question that I ask myself too. So I had no intention of going back.
Where were you going, by the way, before you went back to Grace Redeemer, right? Grace Redeemer with Duck. Where were you going?
Saddleback online,
you were
dude?
Saddleback online. Okay.
Well, I mean, online during the pandemic.
Right.
But
Okay.
before that, Yorba Linda campus.
Okay, so you were still going to Saddleback.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were part of the launch team.
Okay.
Right? With Tosh.
All right.
So December of, what was that, 2019?
Okay.
18, something like that.
So you're still at Saddleback, and then
just serving, attending.
And then David Duck reaches out to you. Why did you go back to Korean church?
It's a long story, man. How long have we gone?
Give me the edited version.
Okay,
the edited version here.
So Saddleback, we're online. Okay, so right before COVID, I had finished my second master's degree. I got another master's degree in management for nonprofit organizations because I wanted to use that to learn how to lead and manage people well when I go back into ministry contexts. Because we learn a lot in seminary. Seminaries are great. There's just limited time to learn all the things. Right. So you take maybe one class in biblical leadership and management, for example. So I spent a whole, year and a half studying management at our business school. And that was just so incredible. So I did that. And after I finished my degree, so when I was in school, I paused on serving. I was like, I can't serve, I can't do this and go to school and work full time and be a parent. Like I just can't. So I paused on serving. So I finished my degree. This is December 2019. So then at that point, I'm like, hey, I reached out to my pastor. I'm like, hey, I'm ready to dive back in. So I was getting ready. I had been kind of doing a little bit of student ministry, volunteer, but I was really thinking about, I think what's better for me is serving on the worship team. So I was doing that. I was getting ready to do that. And then obviously COVID happens in March 2020. So that shuts down. So we're just worshiping at home online. And, we're in the process of adoption. So, we're getting these, projected bills of like what we need to pay. It's a lot of money, right? I'm like, where are we going to get that? And just our conviction was, we didn't want to do a lot of fundraising for it. We wanted to really just like take ownership of the costs of that. So saving and things like that. Right? I mean, we did like a small fundraiser, but selling old clothes, stuff like that. Right. But that's like hundreds of dollars, right? We're needing multiple thousands. So I started thinking like, I need a side hustle. I need to do something to help like an additional income. I don't have any like marketable skills. So I started thinking, well, I could guest speak. I've done that before. So my thought was, I'm going to go and just guest speak, maybe even be an interim pastor. Churches always need interim pastors, right? So I don't like preaching, but hey, I can do it for 3 months or something like that if that's going to provide a steady income. So there was a little bit of that, a little bit of like, hey, I think I need to start serving again because I know I can do a lot. I know I'm gifted in areas that that if I'm not utilizing that, then such a waste, right? So I'm having all these thoughts. David calls me And he kind of just throws it out there. Hey, would you consider like, helping us out here? We really need somebody to be our worship director. And so because of that, and a lot of stuff, I started thinking about it. So part of what went into that decision, so this is where it can go really deep, but we don't have to go there. But I had spent if you look at my trajectory, right, I'm moving away from the Korean church. Part of it, some of it was like, it was a necessity, and not because I wanted to, right? Like my first transition, I needed a job. Then it was more like, okay, you got pushed out. So now I'm like, okay, I just want to reject all of that because I just associate all of that with pain and trauma. So now I'm here. Now this is happening. COVID's happening. We're at home. And what's happening in the world, right? You got George Floyd happening. Because of COVID, you have anti-Asian hate, right? You have all this kind of stuff happening. I'm starting to like, what's swirling in my mind is this desire for a multi-ethnic church, right? I was like, that's what I want for myself and for my family. Not because I think it's better than the mono-ethnic or whatever. That's just what I want. That's just what I desire. And that's the environment I want to be in. But I think I started to come to grips with, man, just because a church is made up of a multi-ethnic body doesn't mean it's really a multi-ethnic church. What I mean by that is you look at who's on stage, who's preaching, who has stage time, who's on the leadership board, who are the decision makers. And when you look at that across not just churches, but even in like Christian nonprofit organizations, you don't see a lot of diversity on leadership. So if you don't see it there, well, things start to happen in the organization that, and you can edit this out, but around that time, you remember there was controversy with Saddleback, with the Asian video, right? And I remember the response was, it was good, but the response was also, this was made a long time ago. But when I did the math, it's like, no, this was made when I was there, right? Like I was there during that time. So, if you don't have like diverse, representation or leadership, like stuff like that could happen. So I just started thinking like, well, where are the multi-ethnic churches that are truly multi-ethnic, where it's not just like, oh, we're gonna make it look like it, but in the leadership and on stage, it's like it's not. I couldn't think of any, dude. I can't, not a lot. And so because of that, I said, well, I can't just like waste time waiting for that to happen or looking for that. So in the meantime, I felt convicted, like I need to be serving actively. I need to be helping. So that was really the core of my decision with David, and to go to GRC was like, this is what I can do. It's better than me just sitting at home watching church online. That's a waste of my talents that the Lord has given me, right? My ability to serve. So I went in actually, and I told him this. I said, I'll give you a year. Like, give me 2. I said, I'll give you a year. And they said, how about a year and a half? I said, okay, let's do a year and a half. We'll compromise, right? Well, it's been more than a year and a half. And I don't know what the future holds, but I know that he is a guy that I trust and that I respect, that I know is not going to take advantage of me or abuse me verbally or any other way. And it's just a really sweet, like, just place to serve and grow with people. And so, yeah, it's honestly, it's uncomfortable every Sunday because I park in the church parking lot. Like within the first month, I got yelled at by, like a gonsanim, I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Like, this is like stuff that I remember. This is why I don't want to be here, So yeah, I do have a lot of that. But, I really appreciate a lot of the wisdom that you've received from this, podcast from the other guys, kind of sharing about like looking at that as a mission field. So that, I think that's great, But yeah, that's how I ended up at GRC. It was just like, I can't just do nothing. I can't just sit around and, whatever. Like I can lead worship, I can preach, and I can spell David, when he needs a break. Because he's like the main guy. Like there's nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
We're a small church plant. So I can do those things. And I feel like that's me just leaning into like my calling as sure.
As you know, I have long history at the Korean side,
Yep.
the Cerritos Mission Church side. And it's really wild to see some of the pics that David puts on Facebook, because a lot of your congregants were my old elementary students.
Yeah.
Is that not buck wild, dude?
Yeah.
Like I see them and I'm just like, oh my goodness. They're like college, even post-college now.
Yeah.
So it's really wild to see that. I don't keep in touch, but I still know like a lot of the old elders and leaders there, and seeing them in pictures is always fun to see. There's always, it's challenging, of course, but there's a lot of good memories at that church as well. And so it's wild that you're there. You're back in the Korean church.
I'm back.
Oh man. You have a very interesting experience I wanted to ask you about, because you had an experience with millennial generation high school students, but now you're working with Gen Z college students at Biola.
Yeah.
Do you notice a difference? Or even if you don't, what is it like? You did like so many long years, 10 plus years of high school ministry.
Yeah.
And then now you're doing a different type of ministry, but with Gen Z or college students.
Yeah.
What are some of the thoughts that you have having both of those experiences?
I think sometimes I don't know. It's like somehow became like the hip thing to talk about like the generational differences. And that's important. Like my management professor is like an expert in generational differences. It actually helped me realize that a lot of my conflict in the KM-EM context wasn't just cultural. It was actually generational conflict. But together it made it even more.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy for us. Yeah.
And I learned that, he says he has this chart where like the two people that have the hardest time working together are Gen Xers with boomers. And I'm like, my God, that explains so much. Yeah. Right. What I love about the students that I work with right now, man, they want to do hard things. Right. So, and you can see the trajectory of this too, right? Seminaries have kind of made the M.Div a little bit easier, maybe reducing units, seeing that, hey, people aren't really wanting to do this. And so when we launched our 5-year accelerated program, it started with an undergraduate degree in Bible and a Master of Arts in Christian Ministry and Leadership for preaching and pastoral ministry. That was it. Okay. We just opened up a whole host of other degree tracks that they can do. Do you know what the most popular track is?
Pastoral.
M.Div.
M.Div, yeah.
M.Div. We have a Bible exposition track where they don't have to do Greek or Hebrew.
Yeah.
Which I think the previous generation, that's why it was really pushed in that direction, because like people don't want to do Greek and Hebrew. It's too hard. We have a track that you can choose one, either Greek or Hebrew, and most of them do Greek. And then at the M.Div, you have to do both. So I'm here and I'm recruiting these students, 18 years old, right? 19 years old, maybe after transferring. And I give them all the options. Dude, everybody wants to do Div.
Why do you think they want to do that? Why do they take the harder one?
They always say, I want to do Hebrew. I said, are you sure? It's really hard. No, I want the whole thing. They want to work really, really hard towards that. Unless it's like, there's other degree options that's like completely different than like the pastoral preparation track. Like you could do, like a leadership track or Old Testament or whatever. But a lot of these students are saying, no, I want this. So that's actually what's helped our program to grow. When we were first doing this, people would say, how do these 18-year-olds know that they want to go into ministry and sign up for a 5-year accelerated program? And I'll say, well, they're looking for it. I get students that tell me, I'm coming here because you guys are the only ones that have this accelerated track. And I tell them, well, I say it in my head, actually, we're not. There's actually a lot of schools that have this. But just go, right? Because they want it. They want to be equipped. They want to be challenged, right? I would say this generation, they're more attuned. These colleges, they're more attuned to what's happening in the world,
for sure,
and in Christianity and in Christian culture. So they're all talking about the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast. They're talking about all the things that are happening that you see on Gospel Coalition or Christianity Today. Like they're super tuned into these types of things, right? And the questions that they're asking when they see all these high profile Christian leaders fall, people that you and I would revere back in the day. And then we find out like, oh, they were jerks or they were predators. Like these students, the questions that they ask is they say, how do we avoid that? How do we stay away from that path? What do we need to do? Like genuinely wanting to know, how do they avoid that type of ending? Because they really, really want to follow the Lord. It's been so refreshing to be around students like that. Now, I admit the students that I'm around, they're what we would consider like the cream of the crop at Biola. Like these are the ones who want to study Bible, go into ministry. So definitely like my experience with these students is skewed, right? It's different. Like I teach a couple of other undergraduate classes that has just everybody. They're different. They're very different. But at least the ones that are looking to go into ministry, I'm really encouraged by that they want to do the hard things and they want to be equipped and they want to know how to, thrive in ministry.
Are you, because I used to teach BBST 103 there. Are you teaching that class right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a fun one.
It's a fun one. But you see the students who like don't want to be there.
Yeah, that was the hardest part for me.
Yeah, it's hard. Like really they don't want to engage with the content. I'm like, man, we're talking about really good stuff here.
Yeah.
And they're just, like, yeah, it's hard.
I never figured that out. Like that was probably the biggest challenge because it's a required course.
Yeah.
Most of them are freshmen.
Yeah.
Like, dude, why am I here?
Yeah.
And I never figured that out. Like try to get them to engage. I really had to just force them, So
it's hard.
It was a tough class.
Yeah.
But you're teaching that right now.
Teaching that. I got 2 sections of that. So almost 80 students. So I see and I read a lot of like what's happening in their life. It's pretty wild.
Okay. You are now in the middle of another adventure where you're about to adopt. Where did that come from you and Annie? Is it something you guys always wanted to do? Is it something that you just felt called to do? Where did that come from?
I blame my biblical training at Talbot for that. So I say that jokingly, but really it's like, what I learned in my training at Talbot was how to read and receive the whole counsel of God, right? So I'm in these classes and I don't know why, but this whole theme of looking after orphans and widows, caring for, those who are helpless, the fatherless, things like that. For some reason, it just keeps popping up in my classes, right? New Testament, Old Testament. There's so many. And I started to realize, oh, God really has a heart for orphans and widows. He cares for the father. So that was just a thought that was kind of like planted, or a seed that was planted in me. And then Annie and I, we both had experiences over in the mission field. She went to Guatemala, spent some time at an orphanage there, both at a state run and at a private orphanage. I went, I've seen a lot of those too, but the one that stood out to me in particular was when I went to Myanmar, and I spent 2 days at an orphanage there, and just seeing like the kids there, like just like I remember thinking when I left, like, man, I wish I could just take one of them with me, just give them a home, So that was part of it. I think that being in youth ministry for so long helped me to realize that I have the capacity to love somebody that's not my own kid, right? So the amount of students that I've had, like the amount of love that I have for them, like God showed me like, hey, you can love someone that's not your own child. And even after having my own biological child, I know that that's still true, that I could still do that. So that was really formative for me. When I left that orphanage that second day in Myanmar, as I was leaving, all the kids came and like grabbed onto me and like wouldn't let go. And I was surprised by that, because I don't think that I did anything in part. I just hung out with them, listened to their stories, and that's it. But when I was leaving, they wouldn't let go. And when I went back and talked to my missionary there, I told him what happened. I'm like, yeah, that's just so weird. And he said, Danny, it's because no one has ever spent that much time with them. So that's why they were holding on to you. Like, Mike, I didn't even spend all that. I mean, yeah, I went 2 days in a row, but like for a few hours here and there. So that was really, impactful for me. And then the last thing was, when my wife and I, when we went on vacation to Thailand, if you've ever been, man, Thailand, it's crazy because like you see the trafficking in your face. Like you can't not see it. It's just all there. And that was just really heartbreaking, right? And then you see the religion there that is so, it's like everybody there's religious, but it's so robotic. It's so conditioned, like there's a statue and people, as they pass by, whatever they do, they stop, they'll bow, and then they'll go on with their day. It was just like a routine. And so just some of that was thinking like, man, if we could save, even just one girl from a life of trafficking and give them a home to be loved, and also to just have a chance to know who Jesus is, right? I don't know if she'll ever follow Christ. I hope she does, but she'll probably have a better opportunity, right? Because, she was born to a Buddhist birth mom, is being raised by a Muslim foster mom right now, right? So those are just some of the things, like you bring those all together and it's really like, I know that this is the heart of God. I don't think it's a command that everybody should do. I don't think everybody should adopt, right? But this is what, I know that this is his heart, and I know that he's given us the capacity to do that. So that's really what moved us forward. And I would say like the selfish reason is like, we just didn't want to go through the newborn stage again, man. That's hard, right?
It's hard.
you got,
especially for our wives.
3 times, right? Yeah. So
where are you in the process right now? Can you share her name? Are you allowed to share that?
So she has a Thai name.
Okay.
So we call her Nada.
Okay.
Because it's her Thai name. It's longer, but Nada is also a Korean name. So that's just how we refer to her right now.
And how old is she?
She just turned 3 in January.
Okay.
So we were matched with her a year ago, and we just got approved to go get her. So that'll happen sometime this summer.
Okay.
Sometime between April and August is when we'll be able to go and get her. So our lives will be radically different when we come back.
And you wanted another girl? You wanted to adopt a girl?
We wanted a girl for sure. And so that's also kind of another reason why Thailand kind of came on the radar, because other places you can't really choose, but they have a stipulation where if you have one gender, you can select the opposite.
What would you say to families who are thinking about adopting, but again, like it's a different culture though?
Yeah.
She's not Korean, she's Thai.
Yeah.
And now she's going to be in a Korean family.
Yeah. What
would you say to families who think about that? Like, is that hard? Is that difficult? How do you get through that?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll have a better answer once it happens, but you definitely need to be aware of the cultural conversations and not just think, hey, you're going to bring this, child into your Korean American family or whatever. So fortunately, like, where I work, like we have cultural conversations all the time. It's like something that we talk about. We get trained on it when we get hired, things like that. So just being aware of that, I would say. But also, you like as a couple, you have to be aligned.
Sure.
Right. So for me, I was open to adopting from any country. Didn't matter where. But for Annie, her preference was, Asia. So, okay, if I'm okay with anything, like that's fine with me. But if I had pushed for somewhere else, there might have been disagreement or not alignment, right? So just being aligned in that.
How come you guys didn't want to make it like the easiest, just adopt from Korea, like another Korean baby?
Well, we thought about it, but the chances were we were most likely going to get matched with a boy.
Oh, and why are the chances like that?
Well, my understanding is that international adoption, they put kids up for adoption within the country first. And then if they're not adopted, then they open them up to international families. And so my understanding is that the girls in Korea get adopted first in Korea.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's true. That's just my understanding of it. And so that's why most people, like if people who have adopted from Korea, they most likely have a boy. It's very rare to find, like I don't personally know anybody with a girl that was adopted, a girl from Korea, but I know a lot of people who had adopted boys.
Yeah.
So knowing that, we just kind of pivoted. And I really like, as we were going through the process and learning the stipulations of each country, because after Korea, we looked at China. China had a lot of stipulations that just didn't meet our, time frame and our expectations. And then we just like, well, what about Thailand? And then like, it just started to align and we're like, that's the way we need to go. It just made sense.
This summer, going to be a big change.
Yep.
An awesome addition.
Yeah.
And another new learning curve.
Yep.
You actually have a life of like lots of transitions and learning curves though. And so maybe this is like the deck of cards that just the Lord gave you.
Maybe. Yeah. I've learned how to transition And each time I learned how to transition well. So, my first transition from Open Door to Living Hope wasn't great. Not because I did anything, but that whole whatever happened. And then that one was not, the next one was really hard. But, when I left Saddleback, I wanted to make sure that was a good transition. So I left staff, but I actually stayed on as a youth pastor there for like another 6-7 months unpaid, because I wanted to make sure that they had the right guy coming in. And so DJ finally hired somebody the 2 days before my son was born. I told him, I said, this Sunday, like, if you don't have somebody, I'm not coming back because he's going to be born. So, and it worked out great. So, so I think you just learn how to do it better. I guess you get more practice.
And now you're doing worship at Grace Redeemer, and that's like your element. You were a music guy. I still remember when I invited you to lead worship for us at UR. It's called WinterCon now, but that was awesome. I loved when you led worship for us, and kind of in your music element. So I'm sure that's really fun for you.
It's fun. I think for me, I realized like I love doing ministry. When I was thinking about going back into part-time ministry, but I don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to sermon prep.
Yeah, message prep.
It just takes so long.
Yeah.
But I can easily prep like a worship set, get all of that together. So it's been really good. So I do that. I also lead worship at chapel at Talbot every Tuesday. So, I mean, there was a time where I was like not playing a lot or as much as I am now. So it's a lot of fun.
What's your go-to electric guitar? What do you like to go to? Because I know you have like a hollow body Epiphone, right? It's like a Gretsch. A Gretsch. Okay, yeah. So I remember you brought that to UR once. But what's your go-to guitar?
That's my go-to because it's the most conducive and least distracting for worship leading.
Okay.
But if I had it my way, I've got my old Rickenbacker Fireglow, the one that Martin Smith used from Delirious, because that's what I wanted to be him,
Delirious,
so I like to bring that out. I got some some fun ones, but it's the Gretsch that's like it's the least distracting and also fits the sound the best for worship.
All right, man, you're a rock star, man. You're a rock star, and leading worship. It's so good that you're using your gifts again, and I love just how the Lord has brought you to this point. It's such a great story,
John. This is fun, and you need to be appreciated because I'm listening back to all these guys. And like I was a kid when a lot of these guys were like doing ministry. So like just hearing that, like you're putting together, or kind of, I don't know if your intention is this, but it's like a history of like Korean American ministry in Southern California. And so just watching those, hearing these legends speak, I am honored to be here. I don't deserve to sit in the seat, but anything for you, man.
Praise the Lord, man. Praise the Lord.